On today's episode of Great British What Ifs, the BMC ADO16, or as it's better known to you and me, the Landcrab. Now this car had everything going for it. It was built around an all-new B-Series engine, designed by one of the greatest engineering minds ever in British car history, designed to be a baby Rolls-Royce even. So what went wrong? Why is it regarded as one of the biggest failures in British car history? Well, we're going to take this top-of-the-range Wolseley 1885 for a drive and find out. After the success of the Mini, Alec Issigonis was something of a legend in the British car scene, and BMC, seeing how successful the Mini had been, wanted to create a bigger brother to the Mini, something to sit up market and up the range. So Issigonis employed similar design techniques to what he used in the Mini to make a small car feel big, to make a big car feel bigger. The ADO17, as it came to be codenamed in development, got this enormous glass house to make it feel light and airy. It's low, which makes it easy to get into, and it's wide, because actually when you're inside the car, being wider makes that much difference. If you've got more width between you and your passengers and the windows, you feel like you're in a bigger space. In truth, the ADO17 was never designed to be quite this big, but it was designed around the new B-Series engine. The B-Series was also being developed for the MGB, but as that was getting slightly bigger and slightly heavier, BMC decided that the 1.8 litre was necessary to move that much bigger of a car around. And Issigonis capitalised on that. If the 1.8 litre was going to be the power plant of choice, then the car could be bigger and heavier, and that meant it could be more spacious and more luxurious. Now we know Issigonis was a man of engineering principles, and he looked at the subframes that they'd been forced to use in the Mini and felt they were inefficient. They were more costly to produce, they were heavier, and they added complexity. So instead he engineered the ADO17 with a much more rigid, much stiffer body shell so the engine could be mounted to it directly. This is a really stiff car, so stiff in fact that when they started doing motorsport with ADO17s there wasn't really any bracing necessary, and the high tech kept on coming. What was now the BMC 1800 after its 1.8 litre engine got hydroelastic suspension.
Hydroelastic suspension uses fluid-filled displacer units in place of springs and shocks, which are interconnected between the front and rear wheels. Each displacer contains a rubber spring, and displaced fluid passes through rubber valves to achieve a damping effect. The displaced fluid is transferred to the paired wheel. When a front wheel encounters a bump, fluid is transferred to the corresponding rear displacer, which lowers the rear wheel, lifting the rear and minimising pitch caused by bumps. The result is a soft but remarkably composed ride.
The 1800 also got automatic brake force proportioning, a valve that would determine how far the car was dipping under braking and could move the braking force front or back to pull it up as safely and as efficiently as possible. The 1800 also had resistors built into the lighting system, so when you were driving at night, it sensed when you turn the headlights on, it would make the tail lights, the brake lights and the indicators slightly dimmer so as not to dazzle drivers behind you. Simple but clever stuff for a car that was launched in 1964. And to maximise the customer base, BMC did exactly the same with the ADO17 as they'd now done with the ADO16, the car in between this and the Mini. They'd offered it under plenty of brands. You could buy an 1800 with an Austin badge, a Morris badge, or this plush Wolseley version. And if you did that, you got a walnut dashboard, you got individual gauges, and an electronic windscreen washer. So often, cars that are the first to use new technologies and come to the market appearing high-tech compromise on the actual driving experience just so they can be the first with a certain technology. But the 1800 really didn't. In actual fact, this is a lovely car to drive. With the automatic gearbox, it's nice and smooth. That B-Series engine is nice and torquey, so it does pull itself along well. And that hydroelastic suspension is really effective at smoothing out the bumps. Okay, this is a slightly tired example of it, but it's still nice and smooth. And that compliant suspension, twinned with this stiff body shell, made the 1800 an unusual but remarkably capable rally car. It came second in the 1968 London to Sydney Marathon, and 3 of the top 20 cars in the 1970 London to Mexico World Rally were 1800s. It quickly got the nickname from pit crews as the Landcrab for being so low and so wide. And so much so, in fact, that nickname just stuck. There is quite a nice charm to those looks, isn't there? So it was high-tech, it was modern, it was comfortable, and it was remarkably capable in motorsport. So where did it all go wrong? One of the most common criticisms of the ADO17 is that it was arguably released before it was ready, and that meant near constant development and improvement throughout its life where the customer was testing it. Just 1 month into production, recline was added to the 2 front seats and an armrest to the rear seats, and unfortunately from there things did not get better. 2 months in, the final drive ratio was changed after oil consumption problems, reassuring, and higher gearing and reduced valve clearances were also introduced. In February 1965, rear hub water shields were added, a steering rattle was cured with a gratuitous spacer, and jumping out of gear issues was solved by method of a synchronizer. In October 65, the rear anti-roll bar was removed and the rear suspension rearranged. In January 1966, the steering was adjusted to fix the tyres scuffing the inside of the arches, and there were stronger engine side covers and modified engine mounting rubbers fitted that were resistant to debonding. Again, reassuring. In June 1967, both seats were replaced with individual benches with armrests, and rather critically, higher geared steering was added to reduce the turning circle. Unfortunately, underdevelopment wasn't the Landcrab's only problem. That low, wide styling was divisive, and certainly compared to BMC's usual fare, it was a bit eccentric, to say the least. What's more, because it had grown in its development phase, it was now about the same size as the Austin Cambridge, a car that, while it didn't directly replace, was killed off around the same time that the 1800 was introduced. And next to the Cambridge, the ADO17 looked expensive. It was 15% more expensive, in fact. Small wonder then that sales weren't brilliant. BMC had hoped for 40,000 Landcrabs to be sold a year, and by the late 60s it was accounting for less than 20,000 annual sales. What's more, because it was selling so badly, management considered it cost ineffective to even try to improve it. The Landcrab is a classic example of a good idea just badly executed. All this engineering, all this technology and all this knowledge that went into it. But because it was rushed to market and as a result underdeveloped, it suffered further and further throughout its life to the point where it became little more than a joke, a footnote in BMC's otherwise rather illustrious history. But as a classic car today, the Landcrab does have its good points. That unusual styling does have a sort of weird charm to it. The hydroelastic suspension means it does ride well, and particularly in this Wolseley version, the interior is nicely luxurious. And as with most BL products, it went on through its life gradually evolving to become the car it should have been at the start. The later Wolseley 6 was powered by the 2.2 litre 6-cylinder E-Series engine, a smooth, refined, torquey power plant that turned this into a baby Rover P6. I'm not going to say this is BMC's greatest achievement. Far from it, in fact. It epitomises everything that was wrong with BMC and then with British Leyland. But it's so close. It's so close to being a fantastic, world-beating car. It's comfortable, it's luxurious, it's unusual, it's really nice to drive, and it does have that charm that only a British underdog seems to be able to give.
History remembers the ADO17 as a failure, but it flew against convention. It stood out then, and it stands out today. The Landcrab dared to be different, and that should count for something.